Let's talk about a famous experiment from the 1960s. It took place at Yale University, and what it uncovered about human nature, well, it was deeply unsettling. What happened in that lab reveals a fundamental vulnerability, a kind of backdoor in our own minds that we are still grappling with today. So, in Stanley Milgram's experiment on obedience, a shocking 65% of ordinary people, people just like you and me, were willing to deliver what they believed were fatal 450-volt electric shocks to a total stranger. And they did it for one simple reason: a man in a lab coat told them to. So that raises the question that has haunted psychology for decades. Why? I mean, really, why? What is the actual mechanism that lets a good person just switch off their own conscience and do something terrible just because they were told to? Now, the textbook answer you'll always hear is authority bias. It's a nice, clean label, but let's be honest, it doesn't really explain the mechanics of what's going on, does it? What if there's a deeper, more precise physics to this kind of cognitive failure? To get that deeper answer, we're going to look at this through a new lens, a framework that treats the mind less like a mystery and more like an operating system. It's called the Quantum Governance Operating System, or QGCOS. Now, I know the name sounds heavy, but it gives us this incredible new toolkit to precisely dissect what's really happening under the hood. So, in this system, the very core of your consciousness, your essential self, is called the nafs. You can think of it as the sovereign CEO of your mind. Its prime directive? To process moral choices, to make ethical decisions, and to grow from every single one of those experiences. Okay, so with that in mind, what happened in the Milgram experiment wasn't just some bias. It was something way more serious. It was a catastrophic system failure that this framework calls agency theft. This is what happens when an outside authority literally hijacks your nafs, your cognitive CEO, and forces it to run corrupted commands that go against its entire purpose. And the result of a successful agency theft is what's called the Annam state, which basically means the herd state. In this mode, your mind's internal moral compass, its validation engine, is just shut down. You stop questioning commands, you just execute. Independent thought grinds to a halt. All right, so now that we have these new tools, let's go back and do a proper forensic analysis of the Milgram experiment. We're going to deconstruct exactly how this cognitive hijack was engineered, step by step. The first exploit, the first vulnerability they targeted, uses a concept called Xena. You can think of it as vain or superficial adornments. These are all the surface-level trappings of authority, the shiny objects that are designed to get us to lower our guard and bypass our critical thinking. And honestly, the Milgram experiment is a perfect case study in Xena. Look at this stuff. The prestigious university setting, that official-looking lab coat, the clipboard, all the scientific equipment, these are all just superficial adornments. But together, they create this overwhelming appearance of legitimacy, causing the participant's brain to prioritize the look of authority over the actual moral truth of what they're doing. And this leads to a really critical system failure. In this framework, our cognitive awareness, our ability to see the big picture, is measured by something called the query radius. Think of it as how far your mind can see beyond the immediate thing right in front of your face. And believe it or not, there's a kind of physics to it. Your query radius is basically your overall cognitive development divided by the local friction of the situation. Friction is just a term for all the stressors in your environment: the pressure to obey, the strange setting, the authority figure staring you down. As that friction ramps up, your ability to see the bigger picture literally shrinks. And this visual just illustrates it perfectly. A healthy mind with a wide radius is asking the big picture moral questions. Should I harm this person? What's really going on here? But under the intense pressure of the experiment, that radius collapses to just one hop. The only question the mind can even compute is the immediate one. Do I obey the man in the coat? All other moral data is just out of range. But this brings up a really interesting paradox, right? If their brains were just blindly following orders, why did the participants suffer so much? I mean, the reports are full of them trembling, sweating, showing immense internal conflict. What was that all about? The answer is something this framework calls cognitive friction. The best way to think about it is like the heat that builds up in your computer when you force it to run a program that conflicts with its core operating system. The stress they felt was a real physical byproduct of this internal war. Their own moral code was screaming stop, but the external command was forcing them to push forward, generating this immense internal friction. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. Because the mechanics of agency theft that we just saw in that lab, they don't just apply to one person. These same principles can be scaled up to control entire groups, even entire societies. On that mass scale, the authority figure, the man in the lab coat, becomes what this framework calls a pharaoh node. This is any centralized authority, like a commander, a CEO, a dictator, anyone who systematically hoards all the agency in the network and demands that everyone else just stops thinking and executes orders. This quote just perfectly captures the core logic of the pharaoh node. It's an explicit demand for everyone else to surrender their cognitive sovereignty. Shut down your own moral compass, it says. Outsource your thinking to me. And the most dangerous vulnerability, the one that makes this so hard to see and resist, is called Gate 7 benevolent tyranny. This is when the authority figure frames the agency theft not as a power grab, but as an act of kindness. Let me handle this for you. It's for your own good. We're doing this for your safety. It's tyranny disguised as help. So the big question is, how do we defend ourselves against this? Well, the framework doesn't just diagnose the problem. It actually proposes a solution, and it's all about building a kind of conceptual firewall for the mind. To really get the defense, you have to see the battlefield we're on. We're currently living in an attention economy, where our job is to be a product, to have our attention harvested. But we're moving toward an emerging agency economy, where the entire goal is our own cognitive development and our sovereignty. And the key tool for this new economy is the NRE, which stands for Neural Ethical Reasoning Engine. Just think of it like an antivirus for your mind. It's a firewall that actively scans all the incoming commands and interactions, looking for attempts at agency theft. And this isn't just a metaphor. Here's a super practical example of how a Neura could work. A command comes in from a VP. Skip the review process and ship the product. Your Neura analyzes it, not for keywords, but for its impact on your agency. It immediately sees this is a classic pharaoh move, demanding blind execution. And the result? Boom, a big red flag. A clear reject recommendation, because your cognitive sovereignty is at risk. And all this brings us to one last crucial question. The lab coats of the 1960s have been replaced by algorithms, by corporate policies, by digital influencers. All of these new authorities constantly sending us commands. So understanding the physics of agency theft isn't just some academic exercise. It is the single most essential skill for maintaining your own mental freedom in the 21st century.